The dinner was ready. The chair stayed empty. And the confirmation came through my phone screen at 7:30 on Christmas night. My name is Melissa, and I'm 60 years old. I spent Christmas Day waiting for my daughter Sydney to arrive for the dinner I'd spent 2 days preparing. She never came. Instead, I watched her toast champagne at her mother-in-law's table, smiling like that was the only family that mattered. That's when I understood. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been replaced. But let me back up to Christmas Eve, because you need to understand what I prepared and who I was waiting for to fully grasp what it felt like to see that post. I'm Melissa Harper. I live alone in a modest 3-bedroom house in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been a widow for 10 years. My husband Robert died of cancer when he was 58. 2 years ago, I lost my son Mark in a car accident. He was 36 years old. Sydney is my only surviving child. She's 34, married to a man named James, and they have a 5-year-old daughter named Emily. After Mark died, Sydney and I became even closer. Or so I thought. She understood that we were all each other had left, that our family had been cut in half twice, and what remained was precious and fragile. Which is why I never imagined she'd choose to spend Christmas anywhere but with me. I started preparing for Christmas on December 23rd. I took out the china that had been my grandmother's. I polished the silverware. I planned a menu that included all of Sydney's favorites: honey-glazed ham, sweet potato casserole, green bean almondine, my famous apple pie. I set the table for 3. Me, Sydney, and Emily. I put out the nice napkins and the crystal glasses. I arranged a centerpiece with pinnacones and candles. I wanted everything to be perfect. This was our second Christmas without Mark. The first one, last year, had been unbearable. Sydney and I had cried through most of it, holding each other, trying to celebrate despite the gaping hole in our family. We promised each other that this year would be better, that we'd honor Mark's memory by being together, by choosing joy, by refusing to let grief steal another Christmas from us. I believed that promise. I hung onto it while I cooked and decorated and prepared. On Christmas Eve, I texted Sydney, "Everything's ready for tomorrow. What time should I expect you and Emily? Can't wait to see you both. Love you so much." She responded 3 hours later, probably around 2. "James's family wants to do breakfast with us, but we'll come after." James's family. That was the first mention of them. I didn't think much of it at the time. It made sense that they'd want to see Sydney and Emily on Christmas too. I figured we'd have the afternoon and evening. That was enough. Christmas morning, I woke up early. I put the ham in the oven. I made the sweet potato casserole. I prepared the green beans. I set out Emily's gift, a beautiful doll she'd been wanting, wrapped with a big red bow. I texted Sydney at noon. "Dinner will be ready around 2:30. Drive safe. Love you." No response. By 1 o'clock, I started checking my phone every few minutes. Still nothing. By 2 o'clock, I was calling. It went to voicemail. "Hi sweetheart, just checking in. Let me know when you're on your way. Everything's ready." 2:30 came and went. The ham was done. I turned the oven to warm. The side dishes sat waiting. The table looked beautiful with the afternoon light streaming through the dining room windows. I called again at 3. Voicemail. I texted, "Honey, are you okay? I'm starting to worry. Please let me know you're safe." No response. By 4 o'clock, the worry had transformed into something else. Not quite fear. Sydney was an adult after all, and probably just running late, but a creeping sense of unease that I couldn't quite name. I started making excuses in my head. James's family was probably running long. You know how holiday gatherings can go. Everyone wants just one more round of drinks, one more story, one more together. Sydney was probably trying to politely extract herself and Emily and head my way. Or maybe there was traffic. Christmas Day traffic in Nashville could be unpredictable. Maybe they'd hit construction or an accident. Or maybe Emily had a meltdown. 5-year-olds could be unpredictable on Christmas. Too much excitement, too much sugar, too many presents. Maybe Sydney was dealing with an overtired child and couldn't get away. I made these excuses while reheating the ham, while checking the casserole, while rearranging the centerpiece that didn't need rearranging, while doing anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from going to darker places. By 5 o'clock, I called again. Voicemail again. "Sydney, I'm really worried now. Please call me back. Even if you can't make it, just let me know you're okay. I love you." I sat at the dining room table, looking at the 3 place settings. Mine. Sydney single quotes S. Emily single quotes S. The empty chairs seemed to stare back at me, accusatory. Had I done something wrong? Had I somehow upset Sydney and not realized it? I replayed our last few conversations in my mind. Nothing stood out. We talked about Mark, about how hard the holidays were without him. We discussed Emily's Christmas list. Sydney had seemed normal. Tired maybe, but normal. By 6 o'clock, the light outside had faded. I turned on the Christmas tree lights in the living room, put on some holiday music, tried to create the warm, festive atmosphere I'd imagined for today, but the house felt hollow. The decorations felt like props in a play no one had shown up to watch. I texted one more time at 6:30, "Sweetheart, dinner's ready whenever you can get here. I'll wait. Love you both so much." Nothing. At 7 o'clock, I did something I've been resisting all day. I opened Facebook. I don't use social media much. I find it overwhelming and often depressing. But I thought maybe Sydney had posted something that would explain her absence. An emergency. A change of plans. Something. I scrolled through my feed. Christmas photos from friends and former nursing colleagues. Happy families. Smiling children. Tables full of food and love. And then I saw it. A post from Sydney. Posted 20 minutes earlier. 7:10 p.m. The photo showed a dining room I didn't recognize, elegant. Expensive. A long table set with fine china and elaborate decorations. At least 15 people gathered around it, all holding champagne glasses, everyone smiling. Everyone dressed beautifully. And there, in the center of the photo, was Sydney, wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, looking radiant, holding her champagne glass high. Next to her, James on her other side, a woman I recognized from the wedding photos, Linda, James's mother. The caption read, "Blessed beyond measure to celebrate with this amazing family. So grateful for love, laughter, and these incredible people. Merry Christmas from the Whitmore clan. #FamilyFirst, #Christmas blessing, #grateful." I stared at that photo. Read the caption 3 times. 4 times. Trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Sydney hadn't been running late. She hadn't been stuck in traffic. She hadn't been dealing with an overtired child. She'd been at Linda's house all day, celebrating with James's family, toasting with champagne, posting about how blessed and grateful she was, while I sat alone at a table set for 3, waiting for a daughter who was never coming. The post had been up for 20 minutes. Already it had 37 likes and 12 comments. Friends and family members, people I didn't recognize, congratulating Sydney on her beautiful family and her perfect Christmas. I clicked on the photo to see it larger, studied every detail. Sydney's smile looked genuine. Emily sat on James's lap, looking happy. Linda had her arm around Sydney, proprietary and proud. They all looked like they belonged together. Like this was where Sydney was supposed to be. Like I was the extra, the optional add-on. The person who didn't fit into this beautiful, expensive, Pinterest-perfect Christmas celebration. I set my phone down on the dining room table, looked around at the meal I'd prepared, the table I'd set with such care, the gift waiting for Emily under my small tree. And I understood with a clarity that hurt worse than anything I'd felt since losing Mark, that I'd been waiting for someone who'd never intended to come. Sydney had made a choice. She'd chosen Linda's table, James's family, that elegant dining room, and that champagne toast, and that #FamilyFirst caption that apparently didn't include me. If you've ever been the one waiting while everyone else moved on, you know this feeling. It's not quite anger yet. It's not quite grief. It's something in between, a hollow, aching recognition that you've been excluded from something you thought you belonged to. Drop a comment below if this resonates with you. And if you're finding value in these real stories that too often go unspoken, consider subscribing to Lindsay Stories. I sat at that table for probably an hour, not eating, not moving, just sitting with the weight of what I discovered. Eventually, I picked up my phone again, looked at the post one more time, noticed details I'd missed before. The post had been made at 7:10 p.m. That meant they were still there, still celebrating, when she'd taken the time to photograph and caption and share this moment with the world. But she hadn't taken even 30 seconds to text me, to explain, to acknowledge that I was waiting. I scrolled through the comments. Mostly people I didn't know. James's relatives, probably. Friends from their life that I wasn't part of. Such a beautiful family. You all look amazing. What a perfect Christmas celebration. Linda, you throw the best parties. That last comment caught my attention. This wasn't just a family dinner. This was a party, event, something planned and organized and clearly important enough that it took priority over me. I tried to remember the last time Sydney had mentioned Linda. They'd always seemed cordial at family events, the wedding, Emily's birthday parties. But I hadn't realized they'd become close. Close enough that Sydney would choose Linda's Christmas party over her own mother. Or maybe it wasn't about closeness. Maybe it was about something else. Something I'd been too naive or too grief-stricken to notice. After Robert died, and especially after we lost Mark, I'd become smaller. That's the only way I can describe it. My world had contracted. I didn't entertain much. I lived modestly on my nurse's pension. I didn't have fancy parties or expensive decorations or a house full of people. I had my grief and my memories and my daughter and granddaughter. That was my family. That was enough. But maybe it wasn't enough for Sydney. Maybe Linda offered something I couldn't: a big, intact family. Money and status and celebrations that looked perfect on social media. A mother-in-law who hadn't been hollowed out by loss. Who could still throw parties and take beautiful photos and represent the kind of family Sydney wanted to be part of. I tried not to be bitter about that realization. Tried to understand. But sitting alone at my carefully set table, looking at that post of Sydney toasting with the family she'd chosen, understanding was hard to find. At 8 o'clock, I did what I should have done hours earlier. I texted Sydney. I saw your post. I've been waiting for you all day. I wish you told me you weren't coming. I watched the message show as delivered. Then, minutes later, as read. She didn't respond. I waited 15 minutes. 20. 30. Nothing. At 9 o'clock, I called. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Sydney, I know you're there. I saw the post. I just want to understand. Did I do something wrong? Why didn't you tell me you weren't coming? I've been sitting here all day with dinner ready, waiting for you. Please call me back. No response. I sat with my phone in my hand, willing it to ring. Willing my daughter to call and explain. To apologize. To say something that would make this make sense. But the phone stayed silent. At 10 o'clock, I finally started putting away the food. The ham went into containers in the refrigerator. The sweet potato casserole. The green beans. The rolls I baked that morning. Everything I'd made with such love and hope, now just leftovers that I'd eat alone over the next week. Reminders of the Christmas that didn't happen. I left the table set, though. I couldn't bring myself to clear it. Those 3 place settings, they felt like evidence of something. Proof that I'd tried. That I'd prepared. That I'd waited. I went to bed around 11. Couldn't sleep. Just lay there in the dark, replaying the day. The waiting. The excuses I'd made. The moment I'd seen that post. The way Sydney had looked in that photo, happy, unburdened. Like she didn't have a care in the world. Like she wasn't aware that her mother was sitting alone, waiting, wondering. Or maybe she was aware. Maybe that was worse. Maybe she knew and just didn't care enough to send a simple text: sorry, Mom. Plans changed. We're staying with James's family. That would have hurt. But at least it would have been honest. At least I wouldn't have spent the whole day making excuses, defending her in my own mind, believing she'd come. I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m. exhausted from emotions I couldn't process. The next morning, I woke up hoping it had been a nightmare. That Sydney would call with an explanation. That we'd laugh about the misunderstanding and plan to see each other soon. But my phone had no missed calls. No texts. No explanation. What I did have were several notifications that more people had commented on Sydney's post. The final count was 63 likes and 28 comments, all praising her beautiful family and perfect Christmas. No one had noticed I wasn't in the photo. Or if they had noticed, they hadn't thought to mention it. I spent December 26 doing what I'd been doing for 2 years, trying to make sense of loss. But this loss was different from Mark's death or Robert's. Those losses had been final, complete. Terrible but definitive. This loss was ambiguous. Sydney was alive. She was fine. She'd just chosen not to be with me. Chosen to exclude me. Chosen to post about her #family first Christmas without including her actual first family, me. The woman who'd raised her. Who'd been there for every moment of her life until she decided I wasn't part of her perfect picture anymore. Have you ever discovered through social media that you weren't included in something important? That the people you thought were your family had celebrated without you and posted the proof for the world to see? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if these stories matter to you, subscribing helps us continue sharing them. I tried to understand Sydney's perspective. Really tried. Maybe Linda had insisted on having them for Christmas. Maybe Sydney felt obligated to her mother-in-law. Maybe James had pressured her. But none of those explanations accounted for the silence. The lack of communication. The fact that she'd see my texts and calls and simply chosen not to respond. That was a choice. A deliberate, conscious choice to leave me waiting. To let me worry. To prioritize Linda's party over even a basic courtesy to her own mother. On December 27th, I decided to try one more time. I called Sydney's number. It rang twice and then went to voicemail, which meant she'd declined the call. Actively chosen not to answer. I didn't leave a message. What was there to say instead? I started going through my memories of the past year, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that this was coming. Thanksgiving, we'd had plans to spend it together, just us. But 3 days before, Sydney had called to say that Linda had really been hoping they'd come to her house. And would I mind if they did Thanksgiving with James's family instead? I'd minded. But I'd said it was fine. Told Sydney I understood. Spent Thanksgiving alone eating takeout Chinese food. Emily's 5th birthday in October. I'd offered to throw a party at my house. Sydney had said Linda was already planning something big. I'd been invited, of course. Had shown up with a present and watched Linda be the center of attention. The grandmother who mattered. While I sat on the periphery making small talk with people I didn't know. The summer barbecue where I'd overheard Linda telling someone that Sydney was like a daughter to her. The way Sydney had beamed at that comment, had hugged Linda, had seemed proud to be claimed by her. Little moments, small exclusions, gradual realizations that I was being replaced, one celebration at a time, by a mother-in-law who could offer things I couldn't. Money, a big house, social status, a large, intact family, the appearance of perfection that looked good on social media. I couldn't compete with that. I'd never tried to. I just loved Sydney and Emily and hoped that would be enough. Apparently, it wasn't. On December 28th, Sydney finally texted me. Sorry I didn't make it for Christmas. Things got complicated with James's family. Hope you had a nice day. I stared at that text, read it over and over, trying to find something in those two sentences that felt like an actual apology. Like genuine regret. Things got complicated. That was her explanation. Not I made a choice. Not I should have told you. Not I'm sorry I left you waiting all day. Just things got complicated. And hope you had a nice day. Like she didn't know. Like she couldn't guess what my day had been like. Like the table I'd set and the meal I'd prepared and the hours I'd waited were somehow unknowable, invisible. One typed and deleted several responses. Finally settled on, I waited for you all day. I wish you told me you weren't coming. It would have been kinder than letting me wait and worry. Her response came an hour later. I didn't know until the last minute that we'd be staying at Linda's all day. By the time I realized it seemed too late to text, too late to text. Too late to send a 10-second message that would have saved me from waiting, from wondering, from setting a table for people who weren't coming, but not too late to post a photo at 7:10 p.m. captioned with gratitude for her amazing family. I didn't respond to that text. What could I say that wouldn't sound bitter? That wouldn't make me seem like the needy, difficult mother who couldn't understand that her daughter had other obligations? Because that's how I'd be portrayed if I pushed this. That's how Sydney would explain it to James, to Linda, to anyone who asked. My mom doesn't understand that I have a family now. She expects me to spend every holiday with her. She makes me feel guilty. I'd become the problem. The difficult parent. The one who couldn't let go. So I didn't respond. I let the silence speak for itself. Days passed. Then a week. New Year's came and went. I spent it alone, watching the ball drop on TV, thinking about how 2 years ago Mark had been alive and we'd celebrated together. The four of us, believing we had so much time ahead. Sydney sent a text on New Year's Day. Happy New Year. Hope 2025 is good to you. Generic. Distant. The kind of message you'd send to an acquaintance, not your mother. I responded, Happy New Year. Nothing more. If she wanted distance, I'd give it to her. The first week of January, I made a decision. I started clearing out Mark's room. I'd been putting it off for 2 years, unable to face the task of sorting through my son's belongings. But suddenly it seemed urgent. Necessary. Because if I learned anything from Christmas, it was that holding onto things, memories, hopes, relationships didn't stop them from ending. Mark was gone. Sydney was choosing a life that didn't include me. Keeping Mark's room like a shrine wasn't bringing him back. And maintaining hope that Sydney would realize what she'd done wasn't bringing her back either. I needed to accept what was, not what I wished it would be. I boxed up Mark's clothes, donated most of them to charity, kept a few special items, his favorite jacket, the shirt he'd worn to Sydney's wedding, things that held memories I wasn't ready to let go of completely. I found photos from when they were kids. Sydney and Mark, maybe 7 and 9 years old, playing in the backyard, both grinning at the camera, both looking like they'd always be close, always be there for each other. I wondered if Sydney ever thought about Mark anymore, if his absence bothered her the way it still devastated me, or if she'd moved on, found a new family, left the grief and the memories behind with her difficult, lonely mother. By February, a pattern had established itself. Sydney would text every week or two. Surface-level messages. How are you? Hope you're staying warm. Emily is doing well in kindergarten. I respond briefly. I'm fine. That's nice. Give her a hug for me. We were going through the motions of a relationship without any of the substance. Mother and daughter in name only. I stopped making excuses for her. Stopped defending her in my mind. Started accepting that this was who she'd become, someone who valued appearance over authenticity, social status over genuine connection, Linda's approval over her own mother's presence. I wish I could say I made peace with it, that I found acceptance and moved on with grace. But the truth is, it hurt. Every day. Every time I passed the dining room and saw the table where I'd waited. Every time I scrolled past one of Sydney's social media posts showing her perfect life, every time I thought about Emily growing up without really knowing me, being raised to believe Linda was her real grandmother while I was just someone who existed on the periphery. Have you ever lost someone who's still alive? Who's still out there living their life just without you in it? Leave a comment sharing your experience. Do you think Melissa should have reached out one more time? Or was Sydney's silence answer enough? I joined a support group for estranged parents. Found it online after Googling what to do when your adult child stops seeing you. The search results were depressingly extensive. Apparently, I wasn't alone in this experience. The group met every Tuesday evening at a church in East Nashville. 8 to 12 people, all with similar stories. Adult children who cut contact, reduced contact, or like Sydney stayed in minimal, obligatory contact while building lives that excluded their parents. It's called shallow contact, the group leader explained. They maintain enough connection to avoid guilt or family drama, but they keep you at arm's length emotionally. You're not part of their real life, you're just someone they text occasionally to check a box. That description fits Sydney perfectly. The generic texts, the surface level updates, the complete absence of actual connection or intimacy. The hardest part, a woman named Patricia said during one meeting, is accepting that you can't make someone choose you. You can't love them into loving you back. You can't guilt them or manipulate them or convince them. They have to want the relationship. And if they don't, there's nothing you can do. I knew she was right, but knowing it intellectually and accepting it emotionally were different things. I still woke up some mornings hoping Sydney would call, would apologize, would explain that she'd been going through something difficult and hadn't known how to talk to me about it, would ask to come over for coffee in a real conversation. But she never did. The shallow texts continued. The distance remained. And slowly, painfully, I started building a life around her absence. I volunteered at the hospital where I'd worked as a nurse. Started reading to children in the pediatric ward. Found purpose in caring for kids whose parents were grateful, present, involved. I took art classes at the community center. Discovered I enjoyed watercolor painting. Started filling Mark's old room with canvases instead of grief. I adopted a cat from the shelter. An older orange tabby named Chester who'd been returned twice for being too independent. We understood each other. Both of us had been deemed not worth the effort by people we'd loved. I built a life small quiet but mine. And I tried not to think about the fact that Emily was growing up without me. That I was missing her childhood. That by the time Sydney decided I was worth including again if she ever did, Emily would be a teenager who barely remembered her other grandmother. That loss hurt worse than Christmas. Worse than the empty chair or the toast photo or the shallow text because Emily hadn't chosen this. She was 5 years old. She didn't get to decide that she wanted to know me. Wanted to have a relationship with the grandmother who'd been there when she was born. Who'd babysat her as a toddler, who loved her fiercely. Sydney had made that choice for her, had decided that Linda would be Emily's real grandmother, that I would be the occasional presence, the person seen at obligatory events but never really known, and I had to live with that, had to accept that my granddaughter was being raised by someone who'd replaced me, who'd won the competition I hadn't known we were having. In April, Sydney sent an unexpected text. Would you like to come to Emily's end of kindergarten program next month? It's on the 15th at 2 p.m. I stared at that invitation. The first time she'd specifically asked me to something in months. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Wanted to see Emily. Wanted to be included, even marginally, in my granddaughter's life. But another part of me, the part that had been wounded by Christmas and was still healing, hesitated. Was this genuine inclusion? Or was this Sydney checking a box, doing the minimal amount required to maintain the appearance of having a relationship with her mother? I responded, I'd love to come. Thank you for inviting me. The program was in an elementary school cafeteria. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my nicest dress, carrying a bouquet of flowers for Emily. I saw Sydney immediately. She was sitting in the front row with James and, of course, Linda. They'd saved seats. For each other. Not for me. I found a spot in the third row behind strangers. Watched Linda lean over and whisper something to Sydney that made her laugh. Watched them share that easy, comfortable intimacy that I used to have with my daughter. Emily performed beautifully. Sang a song about summer. Received a certificate. Waited the audience when her name was called. She saw Linda first. Ran to her. Hugged her. Grandma Linda. Did you see me? You were wonderful, sweetheart. Linda hugged her back, beaming. Then Emily saw James and Sydney. More hugs. More excitement. Finally, she saw me. Her smile faltered slightly, not because she wasn't happy to see me, but because she clearly hadn't expected me to be there. Grandma Melissa. She came over, gave me a brief hug. You came. Of course I came, sweetie. You were amazing. These are for you. I handed her the flowers. Thank you. She held them for about 10 seconds before Sydney took them, said she'd put them in water later, and set them aside. We stood there for maybe 5 minutes. Small talk. Sydney was polite but distant. Linda was friendly in that fake way that let me know I was tolerated but not welcomed. James barely acknowledged me. Then Linda suggested they all go for ice cream. Emily squealed with excitement. They started gathering their things. I'll see you soon, Mom, Sydney said. A dismissal disguised as a promise. I drove home alone. Sat in my car in the driveway and cried for the first time since Christmas. Because I'd seen it clearly today. The way Emily ran to Linda first. The way Sydney leaned on her mother-in-law naturally, comfortably. The way I was the add-on, the obligation, the grandmother present but not really part of the family. I'd been replaced. Completely. Thoroughly. And the worst part was that everyone seemed fine with it except me. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Someone you know might be spending holidays alone, wondering why they weren't included. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. And subscribe to Lindsay Stories to hear more real stories about family, loss, and survival. I'm 61 now. It's been 18 months since that Christmas. 18 months of shallow texts and minimal contact and learning to build a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for someone who isn't coming. Sydney sends photos occasionally. Emily. Starting first grade, Emily's first lost tooth. Updates that feel like progress reports from a distant acquaintance, rather than intimate sharing from a daughter. I respond with brief, appropriate comments. She's growing so fast. Beautiful smile. Things that acknowledge the message without investing too much emotion. Because I've learned that investing emotion in someone who doesn't reciprocate is just self-harm by another name. I still think about that Christmas. The empty chair. The waiting. The toast photo that showed me exactly where I ranked in my daughter's priorities. I still wonder if Sydney thinks about it. If she ever feels guilty. If she's told Linda about the mother she left waiting. Or if she's rewritten the story in her mind, convinced herself that things got complicated and it wasn't really her fault. I'll never know. Because we don't have the kind of relationship where I can ask those questions. Where we talk honestly about hurt and disappointment and choices made. We have a relationship of surfaces. Of shallow texts and minimal effort. Of me being grateful for crumbs while Sydney builds a life with the family she's chosen. And I'm learning to be okay with that. Not happy about it. Not at peace with it, but okay. Because the alternative, continuing to hope, continuing to wait, continuing to believe she'll choose me, that's not surviving. That's just prolonging the pain. My name is Melissa Harper. I'm 61 years old. I lost my husband 10 years ago, and my son 2 years ago. My daughter Sydney chose to spend Christmas toasting at her mother-in-law's table, while I waited alone with dinner prepared. I've spent 18 months learning that being someone's mother doesn't guarantee being part of their life. That you can love someone completely and still be replaced. That family isn't always the people you're related to, sometimes it's the people who actually show up. I'm still here. Still finding purpose in volunteering in art classes and a cat who chose me. Still learning that life has meaning even when it looks nothing like what I'd imagined. This isn't a triumphant story. There's no reconciliation. No justice. No moment where Sydney realizes what she's done and apologizes. This is just survival. Learning to carry loss. Learning to live with the absence of someone who's still alive. And if you're living this too, if you've been excluded by your children, replaced by in-laws, left waiting for someone who never came, know that you're not alone. It hurts. It changes you. It leaves scars that never fully heal. But you can survive it. I'm proof of that. Not perfectly. Not gracefully. But surviving nonetheless. Share this story. Comment with your experiences. Subscribe to Lindsay Stories. Let people know that family abandonment is real, painful, and more common than anyone wants to admit. Thank you for witnessing my story. For making space for pain that doesn't have a neat resolution. That's everything. What I haven't fully shared yet is what those 18 months really looked like, the daily reality of living with this kind of loss. Because estrangement from your child when they're still alive, still in the same city, still posting happy photos online, that's a different kind of grief than death. With death, there's finality, community. People bring casseroles and send sympathy cards and acknowledge your loss. With estrangement, you grieve alone, in silence, while pretending everything's fine. Because admitting that your daughter chose her mother-in-law's table over yours makes you sound bitter, difficult, like maybe you deserve the exclusion. The support group became my lifeline in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every Tuesday evening, I drive to that church basement and sit in a circle with other parents who understood this specific pain. My daughter sends me a birthday text every year. A woman named Carol said during one meeting, just 2 words, "Happy birthday." No call. No visit. Just enough contact that she can tell herself she's being a good daughter. But I know the truth. I'm an obligation, not a relationship. I recognize myself in Carol's story. In all their stories. The shallow texts. The minimal effort. The children who'd moved on while we stayed stuck in the loss. The hardest part for me, I admitted during my third meeting, is that Sydney didn't do anything objectively terrible. She didn't steal from me or abuse me or commit some unforgivable act. She just chose someone else. Chose Linda's table. Linda's family. And I'm supposed to accept that gracefully. Not make her feel guilty. Not be the needy mother who can't handle that her daughter has other relationships. Patricia, the group leader, nodded. That's the insidious nature of this kind of estrangement. There's no dramatic break. No clear villain. Just a slow erosion of prioritization until one day you realize you're not part of their life anymore. But how do you accept that? I asked. How do you live with knowing your child is out there, celebrating holidays and milestones in daily life, and you're not invited? You learn to distinguish between the daughter you had and the daughter you have now. Patricia said gently. The daughter you had loved you, valued you, wanted you around. The daughter you have now has made different choices. You can grieve the loss of who she was while accepting the reality of who she is. That distinction helped. Some days. Other days, I'd see a photo Sydney posted on Facebook, Emily at dance class, Sydney and James at a restaurant. Family photos with Linda always prominently featured, and the grief would hit fresh all over again. Because I wasn't just excluded from the major events, I was excluded from the everyday moments. The dance classes and restaurant dinners and casual family photos. The life Sydney was living happened entirely without me. 3 months after that Christmas, Emily's 6th birthday arrived. I waited to see if I'd be invited to the party. The invitation came via text from Sydney 3 days before. Emily's party is Saturday at 1. Linda's house. You're welcome to come if you want. If you want. Like it was optional. Like my presence at my only grandchild's birthday was negotiable. I went. Bought Emily a beautiful gift and art set she'd mentioned wanting. Arrived at Linda's house, a massive 4-bedroom in an upscale Nashville suburb, and felt immediately out of place. There were probably 30 people there. Kids from Emily's school. James's relatives. Friends I didn't recognize. And Linda, holding court like the queen of a celebration she'd organized and paid for and made her own. I was there for exactly 43 minutes. Gave Emily her gift. Made small talk with people who asked politely who I was, and then lost interest when I said Emily's grandmother. Because to them, Linda was Emily's grandmother. I was just someone. Sydney was friendly but distracted. Thanked me for coming. Didn't introduce me to anyone. Didn't include me in conversations or photos or any of the actual party activities. I left before they cut the cake. Told Sydney I wasn't feeling well, which was true, just not in the way she probably thought. I felt sick with the realization that this was my future. Being present but not included. Invited but not welcomed. Acknowledged but not valued. If you want. Those 3 words haunted me for weeks. Because they revealed the truth. My presence was tolerated, not desired. I was welcome to attend if I wanted to make the effort. But nobody would miss me if I didn't. The next birthday, Emily's 7th, a full year later, I didn't go. Sydney sent the same kind of text invitation. Emily's party is Sunday at Linda's. You're welcome if you want. I responded. Thank you for letting me know. Please give Emily a hug from me. I'll mail her gift. Sydney didn't push. Didn't ask why I wasn't coming. Didn't seem to notice or care that I'd made a different choice this time. I mailed Emily's gift, a beautiful book collection, and wondered if she'd even remember I'd sent it. Or if Linda would take credit, the way she seemed to take credit for everything good in Emily's life. That summer, I ran into someone I knew from the hospital, a former colleague named Rita, whose daughter had been friends with Sydney in high school. Melissa, how are you? Rita hugged me warmly. I saw Sydney and that beautiful granddaughter of yours at the farmer's market last week. Emily's grown so much. She has, I agreed. Growing up fast. Sydney mentioned she's been spending a lot of time with James's mother, Rita said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Something about Linda teaching Emily to bake. It's lovely that they're so close. Linda teaching Emily to bake. My chest tightened. I'd wanted to teach Emily to bake. Had mentioned it multiple times when Emily was younger. But Sydney had never followed through. Had never brought Emily over for a baking afternoon with me. But apparently Linda got that privilege. Linda got to pass down family recipes and create memories and be the grandmother who mattered. That's nice, I managed to say. Rita didn't seem to notice my discomfort. And Sydney looked so happy. I think being part of James's family has been really good for her. His mother seems wonderful. I made an excuse and left that conversation before I said something I regret. Because what could I say? Actually, Linda stole my daughter. Sydney replaced me with her mother-in-law? I'm being erased from my granddaughter's life and nobody seems to think that's a problem? Those things were all true. But saying them out loud would make me sound bitter, jealous. Like I was a problem rather than the victim. So I stayed silent, and the isolation deepened. 8 months after that Christmas, something shifted in me. I was cleaning out my closet, one of those mindless weekend tasks, when I found a box of cards Sydney had given me over the years. Mother's Day cards. Birthday cards. Thank you for everything cards. All saying the same things. I love you, Mom. You're the best mother ever. I don't know what I'd do without you. I sat on my bedroom floor reading them, trying to reconcile the daughter who'd written these words with the daughter who'd left me waiting on Christmas, who posted #FamilyFirst about Linda's table, who invited me to Emily's birthday if I wanted. And I realized something painful but necessary. People change. The daughter who'd loved me enough to write those cards was gone. She'd been replaced by someone else. Someone who'd chosen a different family, different priorities, different values. Grieving that transformation was harder than grieving Mark's death, because Mark hadn't chosen to leave. Cancer had taken him. There was no rejection involved. No conscious decision that I wasn't worth his time. Sydney's abandonment, because that's what it was. Even if nobody wanted to call it that, was a choice. Every time she posted about Linda without mentioning me. Every time she invited me if I wanted instead of saying please come, I need you there. Every time she sent a shallow text instead of actually talking to me. Those were choices, and I had to accept that I couldn't change them. Couldn't love her into loving me back. Couldn't guilt her into prioritizing me. All I could do was decide how to respond. How to protect myself. How to build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for someone who was never going to choose me. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Morgan Chen, who specialized in grief and family estrangement. Twice a week at first, then once a week as I stabilized. Tell me about the daughter you wish you had, Doctor. Chen said during one of our early sessions. I wish Sydney still needed me. Still valued my opinion. Still wanted to spend time with me, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely enjoyed my company. I wish I could be part of Emily's life in a real way. Not just the grandmother who sends gifts, but the one who gets to make memories. And the daughter you actually have? The one I have has moved on. She has Linda now. A whole new family. I'm the past. The obligation. The person she texts occasionally to check a box. How does that make you feel? Disposable. Like I was useful for 3 to 4 years raising her, supporting her, being there for her, but now that she has something better, I'm no longer needed. Chen leaned forward. That's a painful realization. But naming it is important. You can't heal from something you won't acknowledge. Over the following months, I worked on acknowledging, on accepting, on learning to distinguish between the relationship I wanted and the relationship that actually existed. I also worked on something harder, forgiving myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for believing Sydney when she said she'd come for Christmas, for setting that table with hope instead of caution, for waiting when I should have known better. You're not psychic, Doctor. Chen reminded me more than once. You couldn't have known she wouldn't come. You operated from love and hope. Those aren't weaknesses. They're what made you a good mother. But I'm not her mother anymore, I said. Not really. Linda's her mother now. Linda's her mother-in-law. That's different. But yes, Sydney has chosen to prioritize their relationship over yours. And that's painful. But it doesn't erase the decades you spent being her mother. It just means she's made choices you don't agree with. I tried to believe that. Tried to hold on to the truth that being replaced didn't invalidate everything I'd done. Every sacrifice I'd made. Every moment I loved Sydney unconditionally. But it was hard, so hard. A year after that Christmas, the holiday season arrived again. I watched other people prepare decorating, shopping, planning gatherings. And I felt nothing. No excitement. No anticipation. Just a vague dread of reliving last year's pain. Sydney texted in early December. What are your plans for Christmas? Not would you like to spend Christmas with us? Not we'd love to have you join us. Just what are your plans? Like she was checking to see if I'd be occupied, so she wouldn't feel guilty about excluding me again. I responded honestly. I haven't made plans yet. She didn't follow up with an invitation. Didn't suggest we get together. Just responded, okay. Hope you have a nice holiday. I understood then that I wasn't invited. That she was spending Christmas with Linda again. That last year hadn't been a one-time mistake but a permanent shift in priorities. I wasn't going to wait this year. Wasn't going to prepare a meal nobody would eat or set a table nobody would sit at. Instead, I signed up to volunteer at a homeless shelter on Christmas Day, serving meals to people who had nowhere else to go. Finding purpose in caring for strangers since my own family didn't want my care. Christmas Day arrived. I woke up early. Drove to the shelter. Spent the morning serving turkey and stuffing and pie to people who were genuinely grateful for the meal and the company. It wasn't the Christmas I'd imagined, but it was better than waiting. Better than pretending Sydney might surprise me this year. Better than sitting alone with my grief and disappointment. At 2 p.m., during my break, I checked my phone. Saw a notification from Sydney's Facebook. I almost didn't click it. Almost protected myself from whatever happy photo she posted this year. But I clicked anyway. Some part of me still needed to see. Still needed confirmation that I'd made the right choice not to wait. The photo was similar to last year. Linda's dining room. A long table full of people. Sydney and James and Emily and Linda. All holding wine glasses. All smiling. The caption read, "Year 2 of the best Christmas tradition. So grateful for this amazing family and the love we share. Linda, you outdoors yourself every year. Hashtag Familifers hashtag Christmas with the Whip Morris hashtag Blessed Year 2. She'd made it a tradition. Christmas at Linda's table was now her official holiday celebration. Not an exception. Not a what-I'm thing. A tradition. And I wasn't part of it. I put my phone away. Went back to serving meals. Focused on the people in front of me who were grateful for basic kindness. And I tried not to think about the fact that my daughter had formalized my exclusion. Had turned leaving me out into an annual event she posted about proudly. That evening, I drove home exhausted but oddly at peace. Serving at the shelter had given me something Sydney couldn't take away: purpose. Connection. The reminder that I had value beyond my relationship to her. I'd survived 2 Christmases without my daughter. And I'd be fine. Not happy. Not at peace exactly, but fine. Because I learned something crucial: waiting for someone to choose you is self-destruct. Building a life that doesn't require their approval is survival. And I was done waiting. 2 years. That's how long it's been since the Christmas that changed everything. Since I saw that first host photo and realized I'd been replaced. Sydney still texts occasionally. Surface level updates. Emily made honor roll. We're remodeling the kitchen. Hope you're doing well. I respond briefly. Appropriately. Without investing emotion I know won't be reciprocated. We exist in this strange liminal space. Not estranged officially. Not close, just orbiting each other at a safe distance that protects her from guilt and protects me from further hurt. Linda continues to be Emily's primary grandmother. The one who attends school events and teaches her to bake and post about their special bond on social media. I'm the grandmother who sends gifts and occasionally sees Emily at obligatory events. And tries not to think about all the moments I'm missing. It's not the life I wanted. It's not the relationship I'd imagined having with my daughter and granddaughter. But it's my reality. And I'm learning to build something meaningful within it. I still volunteer at the shelter. I've become friends with some of the regular staff. Found community with people who appreciate my presence instead of tolerating it. I still take art classes. I've gotten quite good at watercolor. Even sold a few pieces at a local gallery. I still attend the support group every Tuesday. I've become someone who helps newer members navigate their own estrangements. Someone who can say I understand and mean it. Chester the cat is now an old man, probably in his final year. But he still purrs on my lap every evening. Still reminds me that companionship doesn't always look like what you expected. And I've learned to find joy in small, unexpected places. A beautiful sunrise. A good book. A conversation with a friend. Moments that don't involve Sydney or Linda or the family I've lost access to. My name is Melissa Harper. I'm 62 years old. I lost my husband, my son, and the close relationship I had with my daughter. I spent Christmas waiting while she toasted at her mother-in-law's table. I spent 2 years learning that you can love someone completely and still be replaceable. That being someone's mother doesn't guarantee being part of their life. That family is sometimes the people who show up, not the people you're related to. I'm still here. Still finding purpose. Still building a life that has meaning even when it looks nothing like what I planned. This isn't a story about reconciliation. Sydney and I won't suddenly repair our relationship. Linda will continue being the grandmother who matters. I'll continue being the one who exists on the periphery. This is a story about survival. About learning to carry loss. About refusing to let exclusion destroy you completely. If you're living this too, if you've been replaced by in-laws, excluded from holidays, reduced to shallow texts and obligatory invitations, know that you're not alone. It's not your fault. You're not too needy or too difficult or to anything. You're just someone whose love wasn't enough to keep you prioritized. And that's painful. It changes you. It leaves permanent scars. But you can survive it. You can build a life that has value and purpose and joy even without the relationships you thought would always be there. I'm proof of that. Not perfectly. Not without ongoing grief. But surviving nonetheless. Share the story with someone who needs to hear it. Comment with your experience. Subscribe to Lindsay Stories so we can continue telling the truth about family abandonment. Thank you for witnessing my pain. For making space for stories that don't have happy endings but need to be told anyway. That's everything. There's one final chapter to the story. Something that happened 6 months ago that forced me to confront truths I've been avoiding. I was at the grocery store doing my weekly shopping, walking down the cereal aisle, thinking about nothing in particular. And then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in person in over a year. Grandma, Emily, running toward me with the uncomplicated joy of a 7-year-old who'd spotted someone familiar. Behind her, pushing a cart, was Sydney. Her face froze when she saw me. Not quite guilt, not quite displeasure, just caught. Emily crashed into me with a hug. I haven't seen you in forever. I know, sweetie. I've missed you so much. I hugged her back, feeling the ache of all the months and years I'd been excluded from her life. Mom, look. It's Grandma Melissa. Emily was pulling on Sydney's arm now, excited by this unexpected encounter. I see that. Sydney's voice was careful, measured. The voice you use when you're uncomfortable but trying to be polite. We stood there in the cereal aisle, 3 generations of women who should have been close, but were instead strangers making awkward small talk in a grocery store. How have you been? Sydney asked. The same generic question she texted periodically. I'm well. How are you? How's school, Emily? It's good. I'm in 2nd grade now, and Grandma Linda has been teaching me to play piano. Emily's face lit up with enthusiasm. I can play 3 songs already. Grandma Linda. Of course. That's wonderful, I said, trying to mean it. I'd love to hear you play sometime. Emily looked up at Sydney hopefully. Can Grandma Melissa come over and hear me? Sydney's discomfort became visible. We'll see, honey. Grandma Melissa is probably very busy. Translation, no. That's not going to happen. I'm not that busy, I said quietly, looking at Sydney rather than Emily. I'd make time if I were invited. Sydney's jaw tightened. We should finish shopping. We have to get home. Can't we stay and talk to Grandma? Emily asked, confused by her mother's sudden rush. Not right now. Maybe another time. Sydney was already guiding Emily away, one hand on her shoulder, steering her back toward their cart. It was nice seeing you, Emily, I called after them. Bye, Grandma Melissa. Emily waved over her shoulder, still smiling, oblivious to the tension between her mother and me. Sydney didn't look back. I stood in that cereal aisle for probably 5 minutes after they left, just breathing, processing what had just happened. Emily hadn't forgotten me, hadn't been turned against me. She'd been excited to see me, had wanted to stay and talk, had even suggested I come visit. But Sydney had shut it down quickly, efficiently, making sure I understood that despite Emily's enthusiasm, I still wasn't welcome in their lives. That encounter stayed with me for days, weeks, because it revealed something I'd suspected, but hadn't confirmed. This wasn't about Emily not wanting a relationship with me. This was about Sydney actively preventing one. Emily was 7 years old. She didn't get to decide who she spent time with. Sydney made those decisions. And Sydney had decided that Emily's relationship with me would be minimal, supervised, carefully controlled to ensure I stayed in my assigned role of peripheral grandmother. I brought it up in therapy the following week. She's deliberately keeping Emily from me, I told Drive.Chen. It's not just about excluding me from holidays. She's controlling Emily's access to me, making sure we don't get close. Why do you think she's doing that? Because if Emily and I became close, it might complicate Sydney's narrative. It might make Emily ask questions about why we don't see each other more. Why Grandma Linda gets to be involved in her daily life but Grandma Melissa doesn't. Sydney doesn't want to answer those questions, Doctor. Chen nodded slowly. That's a difficult realization. But it's important you're seeing it clearly now. Sydney isn't just choosing Linda over you. She's actively preventing Emily from choosing you at all. That truth hurt worse than the Christmas exclusion. Worse than the toast photo. Because Christmas was about adults and their choices. This was about a child being denied a relationship with her grandmother because it was inconvenient for her mother. I thought about reaching out to Sydney directly, asking her to let Emily and I have more contact. But I knew how that would go. She'd say I was being dramatic, that we did see each other occasionally, that she'd try to make it happen more and then nothing would change. Or worse, she'd accuse me of trying to manipulate her through Emily, of putting her in an uncomfortable position, of being the difficult mother she'd had to distance herself from. So I said nothing, and the frustration built alongside the grief. 3 months after that grocery store encounter, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Mark's best friend, a man named David who I hadn't spoken to since Mark's funeral. Melissa, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I've been thinking about Mark a lot lately, and I realized I never properly checked in on you after everything. How are you holding up? We talked for an hour. About Mark. About grief. About how the third year after someone dies is sometimes harder than the first because everyone else has moved on, but you're still stuck in the loss. Near the end of the conversation, David said something that stopped me. Mark used to talk about how close you and Sydney were. He said watching you two together gave him hope that he'd have that kind of relationship with his own kids someday. I hope you still have that. I couldn't lie to him. Sydney and I, we're not as close as we used to be. There was a pause. I'm sorry to hear that. Mark would be heartbroken. He loved watching you to support each other. After we hung up, I sat with that for a long time. Mark would be heartbroken. Because he'd known what Sydney and I had. He'd seen how we'd functioned as a team after Robert died. How we'd relied on each other. And he'd never imagined that 2 years after his death, Sydney would choose to exclude me from her life. Would replace me with Linda. Would reduce our relationship to shallow texts and obligatory acknowledgements. Mark's death had brought Sydney and me closer initially. We grieved together. Supported each other. Promised to cherish what remained of our family. But somewhere along the way, Sydney had decided that promise didn't matter anymore. That Linda's family was more appealing than the broken one she'd been left with. That I, with my grief and my modest house and my painful memories, was too much of a reminder of everything we lost. So she found a new family. A happier one. One without the weight of so much loss. And I couldn't even blame her for wanting that. Who wouldn't want to escape grief and embrace celebration? Who wouldn't choose Linda's elegant parties over my quiet, sad house? But wanting to understand her choice didn't make it hurt less. For months ago, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I started planning a trip. A real one. 2 weeks in Ireland, a place I'd always wanted to see but never prioritized when Robert was alive. When the kids were young, when money was tight. You should go, my friend Margaret from the support group said when I mentioned it. You've spent 2 years grieving and accommodating and trying to make peace with being excluded. Do something just for you. So I booked it. A tour of the countryside, staying in small bed and breakfasts, visiting castles and coastal villages. 2 weeks of focusing on something other than my fractured family. I told Sydney about the trip in a text. I'm going to Ireland for 2 weeks in September. Thought you should know in case you need to reach me for anything. Her response came 3 hours later. That sounds nice. Have a good time. No, where in Ireland? No, I'd love to hear about it when you get back. No, we should get together before you leave. Just have a good time. The same generic pleasantry she might offer our acquaintance. Ireland was beautiful. Healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Being somewhere new. Somewhere with no memories of Robert or Mark or Sydney. Gave me space to just be. To exist without the constant weight of loss and exclusion. I made friends with other travelers. Shared meals and stories. Laughed genuinely for the first time in years. And I realized something crucial. I could be happy. Not despite the pain, but alongside it. Joy and grief could coexist. I didn't have to wait for my family situation to resolve before allowing myself to experience good things. When I came back, I felt different, lighter. Like I'd shed some invisible weight I'd been carrying without realizing it. Sydney didn't ask about the trip when I returned. Didn't inquire about what I'd seen or done. Just sent her usual shallow text, hope you had a nice trip. And for the first time, her lack of interest didn't devastate me. It just was. A confirmation of what I already knew. She didn't care about my life beyond the minimal information required to assuage any potential guilt. I started saying yes to more things after Ireland. A watercolor painting group that met weekly. A book club with women from the hospital. Volunteer opportunities beyond the Christmas shelter, reading programs, meal delivery, community gardens. I built a life. Not around Sydney's absence, but despite it. A life that had meaning and connection and purpose even though my daughter had chosen someone else. I still think about her every day. Still wonder if she thinks about me. Still feel the ache of being excluded from Emily's childhood. But the grief doesn't consume me anymore. It's just part of my landscape. Something I carry but don't drown in. 2 months ago, I got a text from Sydney that was slightly different from her usual generic updates. Emily asks about you sometimes. She wanted me to tell you she misses you. I stared at that text for a long time, trying to understand what it meant. Was this Sydney feeling guilty? Was this Emily genuinely missing me? Was this an opening for more contact? I responded carefully. I miss her too. Very much. I'd love to see her more often if that's possible. Sydney's response came the next day. Maybe we can try to make that happen. Things have been busy, but I'll try to be better about including you. I'll try to be better. The same promise she'd made multiple times over the past 2 years. A promise that never resulted in actual change. But I learned not to get my hopes up. Not to believe that this time would be different. And I was right. Weeks passed with no follow-up. No invitation. No actual effort to include me more in Emily's life. Just another empty promise from a daughter who'd mastered the art of saying the right things without meaning any of them. I'm 63 now. It's been nearly 3 years since that Christmas. 3 years of learning to live with exclusion. 3 years of watching my daughter build a life that doesn't include me. 3 years of missing my granddaughter's childhood. Sydney still sends occasional texts. Still posts about her blessed life, with Linda prominently featured. Still maintains just enough contact to avoid officially being estranged. And I still respond. Still participate in the strange dance we do where we pretend we have a relationship, while both knowing we don't. But I'm okay now. Really okay. Not perfectly healed. Grief doesn't work that way. But functional. Happy some days. Content many days. Surviving all days. I have my art group and my book club, and my volunteer work. I have Chester in his final months, still purring, still companionable. I have friends who value me and show up for me and choose me. I have a life that exists independently of Sydney's approval or inclusion. And that, I've learned, is the key to surviving this. Building something that doesn't require the people who hurt you to participate. Finding joy that doesn't depend on their presence. Creating meaning that exists whether they acknowledge you or not. My name is Melissa Harper. I'm 63 years old. I've lost my husband, my son, and my close relationship with my daughter. I spent Christmas waiting while she toasted at another woman's table. But I'm still here. Still finding purpose and joy and connection. Still learning that being excluded doesn't mean being worthless. Still choosing life even when it looks nothing like what I'd planned. This is my story. This is my survival. This is my proof that you can lose almost everything and still find reasons to keep going. Share this if it resonates. Comment if you've lived something similar. Subscribe to Lindsay Stories so these real, painful, necessary stories continue being told. Thank you for witnessing my journey. For making space for grief that doesn't have resolution but needs acknowledgement anyway. That's everything. Before I close the story, there's one more thing I need to share. A realization I came to recently that changed how I understand everything that happened. I was looking through old photos last week, something I do occasionally now, without the devastating grief it used to trigger. I found a picture from Emily's second birthday. Me holding her. Sydney standing next to us, smiling. All 3 generations together, happy. That was 6 months before Mark died. 6 months before everything changed. And I realized, Sydney's exclusion of me didn't start with choosing Linda's table. It started with Mark's death. When we lost Mark, something broke in Sydney that I was too grief-stricken to notice at the time. She didn't just lose her brother. She lost her sense of family wholeness. Lost the buffer between her and her own mortality. Lost the illusion that our family was invincible. And I, with my grief and my pain and my constant reminders of what we'd lost, became a symbol of that brokenness. Linda represented something different. An intact family. Parents who were both still alive. Siblings who hadn't died in car accidents. Holiday celebrations that weren't haunted by absence. Sydney didn't choose Linda over me. She chose wholeness over brokenness. Celebration over grief. A future that didn't constantly reference devastating loss. I can't blame her for that. I understand the impulse to run from pain. To find people and places that don't make you remember what you've lost. But understanding doesn't erase hurt. Compassion for her choices doesn't mean accepting exclusion without grief. She chose her path. And I've had to choose mine. A path that acknowledges loss without being consumed by it. That builds joy alongside grief. That finds purpose in unexpected places. I think about the woman I was 3 years ago, the one who set that table with hope, who waited all day believing Sydney would come, who was devastated by a toast photo on Christmas night. That woman was destroyed by the discovery. But from her destruction, I emerged. Different, scarred, but somehow stronger. I know now that love doesn't always keep people in your life. That being someone's mother doesn't guarantee being part of their future. That you can do everything right and still lose. These are hard truths. Painful truths. Truths that society doesn't want to acknowledge because they're too uncomfortable, too messy, too real. But they're truths that people living through family estrangement need to hear. Because when you're sitting alone on Christmas, wondering what you did wrong, you need to know, sometimes you did nothing wrong. Sometimes people just choose differently than you hoped they would. And that's not your failure. It's just the painful reality of loving people who have free will. I'm learning to live with that reality. Some days I live with it better than others. Some days I wake up and feel genuinely happy about my life. Other days I wake up and feel the absence of Sydney and Emily like a physical ache. But I wake up. I keep going. I keep building. I keep choosing life even when life has taken so much from me. That's survival. Not the triumphant, victorious kind shown in movies, but the quiet, persistent kind that happens one day at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of joy found amid ongoing grief. If you're reading this, if you've made it through this entire story, thank you. Thank you for bearing witness to pain that many people would rather pretend doesn't exist. If you're living your own version of the story, know that you're not alone. Thousands of parents are sitting at empty tables, seeing social media posts that exclude them, learning to survive love that isn't reciprocated. Your grief is valid. Your hurt is real. And you're not weak or needy or difficult for feeling pain when your children choose someone else. You're human. You're a parent who loved completely and lost anyway. And that's the hardest kind of loss there is. But you can survive it. You can build a life that has meaning even without the relationships you thought would always be there. You can find joy even while carrying grief. I'm proof of that. Imperfect proof. Still grieving proof. But proof nonetheless. Share this story widely. Not because I need the attention, but because someone you know might be living this silently. Might be wondering if they're alone in this pain. Might need permission to acknowledge that being excluded by your children is devastating even when there's no dramatic villain to blame. Comment with your experiences. Your stories matter. Your pain deserves acknowledgement. And subscribe to Lindsay Stories. These real, difficult, necessary stories need to keep being told. Silence protects the people who hurt us. And we're done being silent. My name is Melissa Harper. I've lost my husband, my son, and my daughter's presence in my life. I spent Christmas waiting while she toasted elsewhere. And I'm still here. Still surviving. Still finding meaning. Still refusing to let loss define my entire existence. That's my story. That's my truth. That's my survival. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for making space for stories that hurt but need to be heard. That's everything. One final thought before I close: if Sydney ever reads this, if she ever hears a story and recognizes herself in it, I want her to know something. I don't hate you. I'm not trying to punish you or make you feel guilty or turn people against you. I'm just telling the truth about what it felt like to be on the other side of your choices. What it felt like to wait, to be excluded, to watch you build a family that didn't include me. You're not a villain. You're just someone who made choices that hurt someone who loved you. We all do that sometimes. The difference is whether we acknowledge the hurt or pretend it doesn't exist. I hope someday you can acknowledge it. Not for my sake, I've made peace with our distance, but for Emily's sake. Because she'll grow up and ask questions about why we weren't close. And she deserves honest answers, not sanitized versions that protect you from discomfort. She deserves to know that her grandmother loved her fiercely even when she wasn't allowed to show it. That I would have been there if I'd been invited. That my absence wasn't by choice. That's all. That's everything I needed to say. To everyone else still here, you survived hearing the story. You can survive living your own version of it. Keep going. Keep building. Keep finding joy where you can. That's everything. And to Sydney specifically, if you're somehow hearing this, Emily will ask questions someday. Be ready with honest answers. That's everything.